everyone. I'm Christina Joy. Welcome to Sankofa Video Books and Cafe. We've been open since 1997 on the illustrious, right across the street from the illustrious Howard University, HU.
No.
I know that's right. Tonight we have three very special guests here. They're no strangers to Sankofa, except maybe Dr. Prince. Is this your first time? They're no strangers to Sankofa too. Good. All right. With all family over here. I don't know where our host went, but good. He's being a gentleman. So, without further ado, I would like to introduce Dr. Valerie Efua Prince and Hoke S. Glover III, aka Yao, as we all know him over here. And back in the hot seat is Dr. Carr, who needs no introduction because he's here more than we are, you know. But tonight I also want to present a gift to Yao because Yao is very instrumental in Sankofa's history. He's helped us so much throughout the years, and if you don't know, he used to own Karibu Bookstore, which was the biggest Black bookstore in the country. Give us a round of applause. And Sharik wanted us to read this note to you. You did it again with crazy as hell, son. So sorry I can't be there today, but congratulations, Yao, and keep up the great guts work, Sharik. So if you don't know about Yao, Yao is a poet of nonfiction writer and the chair of the Department of Language, Literature, and Cultural Studies at Bowie State University. Dr. Prince is a playwright, nonfiction writer, and a professor of African American Studies at Wayne State University. Now, Dr. Carr will engage in an amazing conversation with these two scholars. Like, let's give it up for them, y'all.
Turn this one on, right? Right. All right, y'all.
Hit the bottom.
Bottom. Oh, I see a red button. It's not gonna blow up. Nope. I think it's on. It's on.
Is this up? Okay, very good. So, welcome everybody. So we have the nightclub lighting. It's very appropriate on Saturday afternoon, Juneteenth weekend. That is it. This is Juneteenth weekend. And today's the 16th? 15th, so it fits the 10th part, so that works. I assume that the Juneteenth insurrectionists, Jack Yates and all of them down there in Houston, they would be considered Galveston crazy as hell. Of course. Okay, it goes without saying. So those of you who haven't started the book yet, Crazy as Hell, officially titled, y'all, both of y'all are wordsmiths. So we say the best little guide to Black history. It's not a little. It's the best, the best. Welcome to everybody who is online, either watching in real time or watching later, as this goes out into the digital universe, the universe that didn't exist when I spent more of my measly HBCU professor salary that I care to remember consciously at your stores, brother. Many dollars. I mean, I had hundreds of dollars in my bank account. I spent so many of them in your store, and I don't regret one penny of them. Let's start a little bit, perhaps, if it's okay with you all. We didn't do a libation, but we should probably recognize somebody else who I think could have very easily made your pages. A brother who made transition on Monday, a founding figure in the fields that we work in, particularly Black studies, a man who was let go by Howard before he went to San Francisco State and started the first Black studies program. And then after a year, he was fired from the stage by the president of San Francisco State because he was crazy as hell as well. And that, of course, is Nathan Hare. Nathan Hare made transition on Monday, so we want to erase his name. Let's start naming ancestors. We'll keep going because we got word yesterday, of course, that the great Angela Bofield made transition. So for people of a certain generation, and young people say, I don't know nothing about that generation, right? Not that advanced age, 70 years old. This book started as a conversation between you all. Is that right? You were at one time colleagues, huh? At Bowie State University? Yes. So please, y'all jump right in, and then we'll move kind of slowly. What we'll do is just for a time check, y'all, at 6:23, somewhere south of 7, maybe a few minutes after 7, we'll open it up for conversation. Maybe we'll start a little bit earlier, depending on how the rhythm goes and how you all feel. Because y'all, sorry, we all gonna be in conversation. Okay, so let's start with you all first, then we'll ease into how you came to this.
Well, first I want to say thank you to Sankofa, the Karimas, Christina, and
Definitely,
everybody,
Chris.
and Professor Carr, everybody who had a hand in making this. This is our launch. So
Oh.
we wanted to do that here at Sankofa.
Oh, that's critical.
Yeah.
Come on, man. Support black institutions.
But I would say that the book took 10 years to be able to write a book in 3 months. So we started talking about various things. The first thing I think that we really did of any significance was start reading each other's work. I think I asked, who's reading you? And he's like, who's reading you? And we exchanged them, and we were colleagues with Rion, Amilcar, Scott, and the three of us started reading each other's work. And I think that was the beginning of a pretty meaningful, ongoing conversation so that by the time the pandemic hits and the whole world has shut down for a bit, we looked around and we were like, well, what are we gonna do now? So we wrote. We started in March 2020, and by June 2020, we had Crazy as Hell.
Okay. You want to add anything to that, Brian? Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. Well, go ahead. You about to say something.
Well, I mean, one of the things is we also did some work on metaphor. And so one of the things that I'll talk about maybe is the design of the book, as a former Black bookseller and then also a creative writer. I'm really interested in practical application of linguistic concepts. And so Dr. Prince and I did work on metaphor. I mean, I think metaphor should be the real framework for the English discipline. English is not really a discipline, it's a language. It's about understanding the text. And metaphor is based on comparison. And so when you get to comparisons, it's like in the absence of, white supremacy, which term I really don't use a lot, it's false. But white supremacy means that you cannot compare, right? If something is supreme, there is no comparison. And so you look at something like the English discipline, that metaphor work that we did is really about saying, okay, well, if you're not operating on that model, where certain things can't be compared, what's the core sort of process that you use when you're dealing with linguistics? And so our metaphor work is 5 or 6 years doing that. And so when you look at this term crazy as hell, what we're really trying to do is get at a phrase that already exists in the way that we practice things as a language. So that's the other thing about that arc, is that we're doing academic work, but in some ways, crazy as hell is the practical application of that academic work that we've been doing for, at least a decade.
18 major clusters of people, institutions, concepts that are crazy as hell. And it's interesting because in the section called, let's see if I find it here, the mythic Negro, you say that our cultures didn't survive the Middle Passage fully. And then in the section entitled, let me see, because this is later on in the book, when you get to the funky, I believe it is, yeah. You say that the things that did survive congealed into a through line that kind of anchors us. It's very interesting as you all see when you buy the book and read. You've answered this question, this first question I had in part because you kind of led into it, but metaphor, which I saw you all having a conversation with folks at the Wright, Hurston Wright Foundation, a virtual one. So kind of then you had a chance to get some rhythm as I was reading and then listening. The tonal quality of our culture, our language, you can't just read it on the page, you got to hear it, because I think you say crazy as hell can have different meanings depending on inflection. With that in mind, Chris gave me this book, the advanced copy, and then I came back and got the copy that you buy. And first time I read, I said, How crazy is hell? Now, that's not an insult. As you know, this book has many parents. Apparently, y'all let a lot of people read it, a lot of people, and then I saw intermittently in here, y'all arguing with the editor. Not quite an argument. The editor got something bragging saying none of it. So help us understand the various iterations of what it means to say crazy as hell. And maybe how that ties to how you compose this book. Because while you two are the parents that gave birth to the form that we have here, there's a lot of people in this conversation, in addition to all the people you're categorizing in this book. So what was that creative process like to get to this?
I can start us off.
Okay, please.
I can start us off because initially we were like, we're gonna master feed this thing. We're gonna print this on some newsprint, like
Yes,
pamphlet,
indeed.
and we're gonna sell it out the back of our truck.
Cash money, better do it.
And we're not gonna put our names on it.
Oh, wait, really?
Oh, yeah, we would, it could be an authorless text.
I mean, go ahead. Yes, so y'all, okay.
No, I mean, it
You
could
want
be
to
an
put your-
author. Nah, because it doesn't need our names. I mean, we're not celebrities. We're not famous. You know, I mean, it's not a downloadable book or buy this book because the people are important and the ideas are important. It's not really that type of book. It's a book about how we talk and how we think. And the creativity in the language is not even really creativity as much as it's listening to the way we talk. And not just the way we talk, but also what our perspective is. You know, there's a way that the Black community doesn't take Black history as serious as the academic community does. So, you know, our concept is free Black space, which is barbershops, salons, prisons has come up as an extension of that, churches. And so there's this way that in our community, it'd be like, yo, I mean, you know, Malcolm, yeah, I'm down with liberation and all that, but you know he crazy as hell, right? I mean, this is the way.
That's an inflection right there.
Yeah, I mean,
you know
it's
you're
like,
crazy as hell.
you know he crazy as hell, right? Because I mean, who else follows Elijah Muhammad, right? Most of us, even if we respect Elijah Muhammad, we're not gonna follow Elijah Muhammad, right? Because Elijah Muhammad is crazy as hell, right? So
Again, this
again,
crowd here is crazy as hell. There are many hoteps in here, probably in conversation with one right here. Because my thing is, I can write hotep on somebody's forehead in Meta Nature. If you can't read it, who's crazy? But the point is this. But there are Wakandans in here. This is a crazy as hell crowd.
yeah, exactly.
Wait, oh, they are?
Of course.
So who crazy as hell?
I mean, I
Are you crazy?
of course,
You crazy.
of course.
Undoubtedly.
All right, I ain't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
I mean,
Lord have mercy.
yeah. So again, you know, the intonations change. Dwayne, you know, we got to talk about Dwayne. Just
Please say something about that, brother, who writes the introduction.
Right.
MacArthur,
And
Grant,
so-
Wardy, and
yeah. So you know, Dwayne. You know, I met Dwayne 6 months after he got out of prison at Bowie State University at a gospel
And
concert.
for those of you watching, if you don't have the book yet, but you can get it at sandcope.com, Dwayne Reginald Betts. Some of y'all probably heard that name before.
But I meet him, and I got 30 books on the table that are not going to sell. It's a non-selling event, right? So the non-selling events, I take books that I want to read, and I read them again. So then when somebody shows up that read all the books that you read, you're like, he's crazy as hell, right? But you know, we talk for a few minutes, and then I hire him, and that turns out to be the only MacArthur fellow I know.
Wow.
16 years later, 20 years later, he's a MacArthur fellow. He calls me one day. This dude's so smart. He called me one day like, yeah, I'm going to law school, but I'm only going to go if I can go to Harvard. Crazy as hell, right?
Crazy as hell.
I'm only going to go if I go to Harvard, and I got to be in the top 5%. He got, what, a 175 on the LSAT? Out of
You
178.
got to think crazy as hell. Somebody who took the law.
Yeah.
You can't be sane in that category.
So, but Dwayne, you know, and that's the thing through the editing process is Dwayne really wanted to stress that every single intonation of crazy as hell had a very specific meaning, almost like we put them in the glossary. We just didn't have time for that. I mean, that's a really daunting sort of phrase, which is, but that's the type of work I think English scholars should be doing, right? Coding the language in these I think that Black English and Black language, you know, like again, I spent time in China, and it's like the 4 tones, right? Or the 6 tones of Cantonese, right? Our way that the tonal language has been standardized, right?
You're
And so-
eat tree, all
Yeah.
that language. Yeah. Ebonics.
Ebonics, yeah. So there's this right. So again, Dwayne, when he was editing the book, I mean, it's really like one of the best literary conferences I've ever been to, you know, because it's like we're editing the book and we're arguing, we're going back and forth, and actually, little secret text is that the inmate entry that belongs to Dwayne, he got mad at us in the editing process.
Really?
And he sent it back to us and just wrote himself into the book, really to just let us know he was mad. And then we were like, oh, damn, that shit works. Like, keep it in. And so, and the same thing with all of those notes that are there. And the thing
The
that
notes meaning the editorial comments.
that's right. So he was making comments. And again, and I would argue we're getting close to hip hop, y'all. You know, or jazz, right? The text is operating in this different way when people can sort of chime in on it. And that goes back to that author thing. That if you are the author, and that has this connotation that it's your book, and it's so important, when somebody else chimes in like that, you don't take it the same way if somebody comes in with a great solo on a composition you have. But that's the way we look at the additions that Dwayne put here. And I mean, and I think probably everybody in this audience can go home and do a crazy as hell entry on their uncle, their grandma, or somebody they know in their community.
Once you raise
It's
on
almost
the
like
tip,
you
on the
freestyle.
tails.
Yeah, you can freestyle.
Hey, Prof.
Yeah, I was just gonna chime in, yeah, because it's like, because it doesn't matter that we're the author, when somebody else comes in with a different perspective, even if we disagree, even if we're arguing about it, it becomes another layer. It's like music. It becomes another layer. And so it's like we don't write that out, we write it in. Because it's like a community, it's a conversation. And that's the whole root of this, is how do we talk when we're together? Like we're sitting in a room, in a bookstore, having a conversation.
Is there
So conversation is key to it. It's ongoing dialogue. You got Charlie Parker in here relaxing in Camarillo. Ken Burns tells that story in his documentary on jazz. He doesn't tell it like y'all told it. Charlie Parker was put him in the asylum, a whole section on asylums, including one I hope we will talk about in Maryland. Apparently was an inspiration for the text. And Parker composes one of the most famous pieces in what Nick Payton would call Black American music, Relaxing at Camarillo. How you relaxing at the asylum? I'm saying, crazy as hell. But it's in here. But you know, and you just answered one of the questions I had. It reminds me, maybe about 20 years ago, I was in Detroit at the Afro World Festival. They have every year. It's coming up again in July. And I was walking down the street with Anderson Thompson, the great Black nationalist. And we're walking, and there's a brother coming toward us, like he's from like where across the street is now. And he's coming, and you see people partying like the sea. And then the closer he gets, we can hear his voice. What the hell? What's wrong with y'all? I'm going to hell. Farrakhan is right. You better listen to Farrakhan. I mean, these white people, and people just party. No dialogue to the point that you raised. They're just trying to avoid it. He passes us. That Thompson listens to me and he says, you know what's crazy? I said, what? He said, you the only sane one out here. Crazy as hell doesn't mean these people are crazy as hell necessarily, does it? But you got shooters in here. You got John Lee Malvo and Tom Muhammad in here. You got the brother, what's his name, Dahmer, Christopher Dahmer, because out in Cali that they burned the whole force down to get at. You know, at the same time, you got Fannie Hamer's mama and Medgar Evers' father. So crazy as hell is it an umbrella that you just hope will spark dialogue? And then in that conversation, we might come up with definite, I don't know, because it's led by what you just said about this question of discussion.
Part of it, the umbrella is Black history. Right? When somebody puts you on a boat, they march you across the continent.
First, yeah.
They put you in some dark hole. Then they take you out to the ocean and put you in the bottom of the boat. And then they take you across some water. And then when you get out the other side, you're not even supposed to be human. That's insane. If you internalize that, that's insane. There's no way that somebody calls me a cow and I think I'm a cow.
Okay.
Or thinks I'm a horse or some kind of animal and I think that's what I am. In order to believe that, I have to be a little crazy. So it starts when somebody says you're Black and this is what that means. You're child. the whole of the experience of being Black is kind of crazy. So then, once you accept that premise, you can start to look at all of the facets. And when you mention the serial killers, part of why we're talking about serial killers is because Black people, when I was growing up, and I'm not that much different in age, we were in the same camp here. When we were growing up, they were saying that we don't have serial killers. Black people ain't serial killers. That's what white people do.
Interesting. You got Wayne Williams here. And we all
Yeah,
remember
well, he
Wayne
was
Williams.
some kind of exception, right? We were
Oh,
like,
I see.
okay, you
I
see, and it took a long time to figure it out, all of that, because we don't have serial killers. We were very proud of that,
Mhm.
which is crazy. That's a crazy idea. And so it's just like, I mean, we were like, not only do we have serial killers, look at, I mean, what's the guy? I co-authored the book and I can't remember the man's name.
Writers constantly say that. You wrote so much.
The one who was like the serial killer of all serial killers.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
We did write the book. We did write the book.
You
Y'all get the book, read it.
You talking about Samuel Little,
Yeah.
the Grim Sleeper.
So
That's the other thing. Black people give nicknames that go forever. The Grim Sleeper. Because he was the one who went from coast to coast killing women. And many people may not have heard that. There are some names in here you may not have heard of. So that's that raises something that I hadn't made a note to ask, but now you just raised it. Africa makes a very specific appearance here, but usually to use, I hope I don't use it wrongly, kind of metaphor. So you tap into Bugs Bunny through SU, Anansi makes an appearance. Nancy, you glossed it, of course. But I don't see a lot of continental Africans on here. Like, for example, you do make the point that some people was crazy when they got put on the book. You say obviously, right? Because we're human, right? That's the whole point. So at any point, did we lose our humanity? Or is this a testament to the fact that these are very human reactions to the craziest situation, perhaps in the history of human beings, which is, for lack of a better term, Western civilization?
I mean, people can't lose their humanity.
Oh, that's a critical piece.
Yeah, I mean, we're human, even in our. I mean, even the way our dysfunction iterates is distinctly human. Yeah, but even the way our dysfunction iterates is distinctly human. It's like a lion go crazy, you're not gonna kill all other lions, right? I mean, it's a human thing. So, I mean, I think this question of sanity and insanity, we'll go back to hospital or
Please.
But it's like, in my old business, my partner called me mentally ill. I mean, like a key part of like the end of Caribou is having somebody in a leadership position who has as much power as you call you crazy. I mean, if you want to train your kids to be super smart, give them that problem and ask them to figure out how you resolve that. And at the same time, maintain the legitimacy and the integrity of the institution. Because the power to accuse is a very important power, and it's hard to ward it off. And so in some ways, for me, crazy as hell is an answer to that particular riddle. So maybe 6 or 7 years later, you get to the point where I encountered a hospital for the Negro insane, because Dr. Malifa Love, who's like a sage, that's a just beautiful Holy Spirit, does work with freshmen at the hospital for the Negro insane. But there's this lingering question for me about sanity that's raised because somebody who I love, who I built a business with, called me crazy. And so I'm trying to figure out how you deal with that. And so I write this essay called The Hospital for the Negro Insane. It's on my Free Black Space blog, and it gets a little bit of an award. But sooner or later, by the time Dr. Prince and I get to it 3 or 4 years later, through our conversations, I mean, the real question is slavery is a question about the accusation of sanity or insanity. It's about the inversion of the idea of sanity. So the slave master says, you're insane because you don't want to be a slave, which says that they're insane because they try and enslave you.
So this riddle, this dichotomy, these contradictions, and I'm all on this Chinese stuff with yin and yang, and it's this very difficult sort of parable to figure out. So an important part of the book, but then you get to the way that African Americans use language, and it's not just African Americans. You can write crazy as hell for America, because the people that started this country crazy as hell. The people that were immigrants crazy as hell. You go to anybody's history, this idea of what is sanity and insanity, and how it is that society defines sanity, right? As compared to what is sanity in terms of unity with nature or unity with phenomena. I mean, you could argue that society is simply, the construction of a society is to try and create an idea of sanity that is in sync with sanity as if you were in nature. And societies fail, and it evolves and it cultivates. So linguistically, African American people, like all people, play with that, and we categorize it, and they say that's crazy as hell, and they talk about it. And so for us, we were just, I mean, like, when I'm talking to people academically about the book, and that's happened a few times, I mean, it's really sort of phenomenal to me, you know, because it's like, we weren't really thinking on that level when writing the book. It's almost like we get to this floodgate or this ocean where the intellectualism that exists outside of academia before training is the thing we're tapping into, and we feel free enough to sort of blur those lines and not be smart, not apply all of the rigor and all of that, but to apply the rigor that our fathers and our uncles and our mothers and our grandmothers and all the Black folks. Because I mean, at the beginning of the book, we say in order to do certain things like information literacy, think like the slaves. The slaves was real clear about information literacy. Every time Mass opened up his mouth, you know he's lying, or you know that he's bending the truth. Like, and that's not because you went to Harvard or Yale. You did a whole lot of research. Your position in relationship to the actual culture and what's happening, phenomena, your life gives you a certain intellectualism that rises out of that so that you understand how to decode things. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to blur those lines and say, it's not about you got a degree and you got educated. And again, does that make you no longer crazy, or does that make you completely sane because you got educated? Nah, everything says that it's not. So we're blurring the lines, you know? We're trying to, again, tap into that particular root. And again, I think that's what African American, like the way everybody looked at me when I showed up with dashikis and I changed my name, then it's crazy as hell, right? I mean, like, what's wrong with it, right? Like, why is he on that, right? But really what I'm trying to do is work out some fundamental questions about what sanity is and what insanity is. You live in a family and you gain knowledge about African culture. Part of what you do is you look at everybody differently, right? Like, I wake up on Thanksgiving, I'd be like, it's crazy as hell. Why are you celebrating that, Joe? I mean, sometimes, and I mean, I'm using my daddy's name now, but I'm like, why after all the slavery would you name your kids John? Like, why? I don't understand that, right? And again, that's all softened, and that's part of what this book is, right? That part of what we're getting at is not the rhetorical line about what's right and what's wrong, right? But the fluidity, the ability to be dynamic and to move in and out of that, because that's who we really are. That's what we've been doing. We're not in one place. We don't get educated and it changes. We don't negate it. We stay in flux. We move in and out of the sanity or the insanity of our position.
In that context, and a couple things come to mind. Talking about another place where people are committed, and I guess the section on the asylums is called committed. So, it's committed, right? And you evoke Richard Wright and Ralph Ellison, very specifically engaging in this conversation with this doctor who's treating Black folk for mental illness. And Invisible Man is very well celebrated. I always read and think, you crazy as hell. But that's because I'm an unreconstructed Pan-Africanist Black nationalist, which would make me crazy, and that contempt is mutual. So, it's not a problem. But when you are, and I'm going to stay with Kariba just for a second in the context of the launch, if we are fluid, and there's no judgment, we're just kind of seeing how people work out the world. When your partner calls you crazy, and you write and talk and have talked and right here about entering that business enterprise as the writer, the poet, the artist, not the business person, which would, I guess, make you kind of crazy. Going into what becomes the biggest Black bookstore. And then this brother who comes in sometimes every day, who you use as a barometer for judging how far or how close you are to the very community that you're trying to serve. First at those kiosks across the street from the housing project. In other words, is there a moral barometer for our people that you're using to kind of guide us through this? It is fluid, but is there a kind of course of conduct that you want people of African descent to kind of form and move toward? And how does not writing intellectually serve that process? Like, what's the audience that you hope will pick up this book and then begin to absorb it and then dialogue and argue and have conversations around it on the way to, I hope, is some destination? Or maybe I shouldn't say I hope. I'm thinking, is there a destination you want our people to get at, and how we judge how we're making progress in it, as we're talking about the fluidity of how we just navigate, and maybe even survival itself becomes the goal. I'm not sure.
Before I pass the mic,
No, it's for either one of you. I just kind of started with it.
well, the question of morality, I don't think is in our mind.
Okay.
Ethics might be.
Okay.
So we would
Please
probably
help us make that distinction.
distinguish between morality, because once we start talking about morality, we often think in terms of binary, good and bad.
Like white man's the devil. You got Elijah Muhammad in here saying that's crazy as hell.
Right. We're not thinking about things in binary opposition. It's way more nuanced. I mean, Hoke just referenced the yin and yang. You know, we're thinking about, he introduced me to the practice of Tai Chi. And though I do not do as much, and I'm not nearly as committed to the practice, I've practiced it long enough to understand some things about how difficult the practice is, how important centering is, how important balance is, and it throws off these simple reductions to this or that. So in terms of morality, we're not there.
Yes.
So as a matter of fact, some of those arguments we were having with our editor had to do with those moments when there were these insertions that were about this or that.
Oh, wow.
And that's just not the way we see it. And I don't think, generally speaking, if we like walking down the street and having a conversation, or overhearing conversations, I think it's more complicated, the dialogues that emerge. So no, I don't think we're trying to push anybody toward any kind of morality. We do, I think in terms of ethics and integrity. Matter of fact, the arguments were about the integrity of the book, which is why the editorial voice had to be apparent.
Yeah.
Because we took 10 years of conversation to write a book in 3 months. We have been discussing some things of some significance so that when we start writing, we know what the thing is to be. So when we hear it, we recognize that that's not what we say. So then we push back, but people weren't in that 10-year worth of conversation. They don't know what we were talking about. So when we produce the thing, it looks simple. It looks easy. But it took 10 years for us to write that. It's like Tai Chi. I mean, people look, if you're moving slow, you got your hand wide, you know, but then they start to try to do it, and next thing you know, their foot is all the way over here. They think their foot is over here. And try it if you don't believe me. Because you look and you say, well, your foot is supposed to be at 45 degrees. And they're like, uh-huh. And I'm like, no, look at your foot.
Look at your foot.
Your foot is not at 45 degrees.
Interesting.
And jazz is like that.
Jazz is.
Right. When somebody says that.
But jazz got rules.
I know. I mean, so somebody says jazz, and it's like, you just do whatever you want. Nah, no, it don't work that way. Think real thin line through a sophisticated set of concepts to be able to improvise.
What was it? Stanley Crouch once said of Jack Johnson, who's in here, that's crazy as hell. Genius is the ability to make the difficult thing look simple.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? Oh, I can do that. Then you get in the ring, be like, oh shit. You got Jack Johnson, you got Mike Tyson in here. What Mike said, everybody got a plan until he get hit.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So there are kind of rhythms to this. That if you okay.
But the other thing that I think is really important is that, you know, white privilege is not in this book. Racism is not in this book. the trends and the buzzwords that are used to sample into an African American discussion are ways that people position themselves in a market economy. People say they don't like capitalism. There's a blackness economy. There's a market economy of blackness. There's a certain set of words that you need to use to make yourself relevant. And so our discourse, the record of our intellectualism in this country is flawed by all of these trending concepts. And it's cyclical. It's not consistent. It's not definitive. It's not linear progress. It didn't happen. It didn't change. It's going to happen again because we have not really gotten down to the root of, again, something as simple as a literature is only as good as its capacity to record people's consciousness. So we're not really about the business of recording the right consciousness, saying the right facts. We're not trying to be smart. African Americans are preoccupied with being smart because smart is something that you can use within the economy to leverage yourself. But my uncle's smart, my granddaddy's smart, my grandma's smart, my mama's smart, my aunts are smart, my kids are smart. Like, I mean, the capacity to take language and to say something that's profound or to capture it is not limited to whether you study with some white folks or not. And so our literature is a record of our engagement with white people, not our consciousness. 95% of our literature is really about, like, if all the white people disappeared, they'd be like, why are they in all these books? Why do they keep talking about them? Like, what's so important about them? So really, part of what we're trying to do is not be moral or ethical. And again, I would say this too. I mean, it's like, it's really about, you know, it's like a bunch of monks, you know, in Tibet, right? I mean, what are they trying to change? I mean, what are they really trying to do? Like, the best of African American culture is about humanity, not about white people. It's a cop-out to suggest that you change white people's society and that's your passport into humanity. That to me sounds like another form of slavery.
Oh, no question.
You know, so what we're really getting at is that's not even what it's about. Like, or maybe it is about that, and we've been trained, right? So we're not divorced from that, right? And we're not trying to get above it or get beneath it, right? We're just really being ourselves. I mean, that's what this book comes out of. It's just like having the audacity to be yourself. You just say, this is the way I'm going to write it. And then we're lucky because a black man who happens to become a MacArthur fellow, who went to prison, goes and pitches it to the editor. Like, that's an important thing to stress.
At Norton?
Yeah, an editor at Norton.
Which leads me to the question I wanted to ask. Why Norton and not Black Classic or Third World? And why does the MacArthur mean a damn thing to us if he just, oh, that just means he's just being himself.
No.
I'm asking, I did have that question.
No, and I agree with you, but I know.
Well, I'm making a point. I was asking the question because I'm trying to hold off on the no moral, no ethic. I'm just asking. It's fluid, right?
I'm with you completely, but I know Paul Coates, and I've had discussions with Paul Coates. I talked to Paul Coates the night that Ta-Nehisi Coates was on Charlie Rose, the night before Between the World and Me came out. I asked Ta-Nehisi on my Facebook page, I said, Ta-Nehisi, I said, you about to get rich, what's up with us?
Oh.
And
It's not about morals and ethics.
No,
he had no responsibility to you.
And he sent me
Crazy as
you
you think you
right? So he sent me his father's number, and I was talking to his father, right? On the phone. Like, this is while he's on Charlie Rose, right? Oh. So, I mean, my thing with this, and Dr. Prince mentioned this, is we were going to do this masterpiece style. No. And Dwayne was down for that. Yeah. But here's the issue. Dwayne received him. He got so busy, he couldn't do masterpiece after that. But here's the other thing that's important. After running a black-owned business, I mean, I lost $1 million in karaoke.
Talk to us, and you make that point. That real, please.
I lost $1 million. So if, say this book, I mean, who knows how many copies of the book we sell, but having Norton, if you want to sell 100,000 copies of the book, I don't have to come ask Dr. Carr and Sankofa to give me donations so I can make the print.
Yeah, it's not a thing.
And I'm saying that's real. If you came and shopped at Kerry Eagle, the reason I lost $1 million is because every time I had to order $100,000 worth of books, I kept enough cash in the bank so I could do that. You don't know no issue I had. You had 160,000 customers.
We do like $4 million a year. Find me somebody where the money wasn't right when I was there. But when I lose $1 million, don't nobody be like, y'all lost $1 million because he ran his business right and he managed that risk in a different way than most people do. People like he crazy as hell. Why didn't he handle his shit?
Exactly.
And I'm saying, that's not the book I wrote. And I'm not going to write that book, right? We're on a different iteration. So Norton is a very practical application, which I'm not hating on anybody that does that. I mean, I might sound like I'm hating some days, but I'm not hating on the reality of economics and how it works.
Yes,
I mean, and people got jobs, right? I mean, like, why don't everybody in this room start their own business? I mean, this is ridiculous, right? I mean, this sounds good, right? If you got a little equity in your house, right? I did it. I started my business with $500. $500, right? But I'm saying that's not everybody. Not everybody can do that.
your business books.
Right.
Which means you crazy.
Not crack, right?
Which
Not crack.
which makes it, by the way, the comparison between crack and book
Yeah.
is in this book.
So,
Because people gonna buy crack and pay y'all Rayful Evans in here.
I know. The husband's drug dealers.
At what point you say how much crack did he sell relative to how many people, black people bought books?
He sold $300 million worth of crack out of this little city right here, which is more money than all the black people spent on books for maybe like 2005 or something like that. I mean, you imagine that. You know, you imagine that. So the hardcore economics, and this is the thing. We're thankful to Jill Belowski. Definitely thankful to Reginald, Dwayne, Betts. And again, that baseline, I mean, those are things folks got to struggle with. And that's another reason we don't have that moral charge, which is this is what you should do. Because we have, and I mean, that's the reason the book is a breath of fresh air. Because when you read a book and folks are doing the trend thing, they do that by indicting people who don't do what they do. But when you get in a free black space with black folks, we're not really indicting each other that hard. Like you show up, we just be like, it's like the church. I mean, you show up, we be like, yo, I mean, here with us, this is the conversation we're having, right? And we give you space and room for an integrity that says, given how diverse our situation is, how difficult it's been, you have the space to manage that way. But the guideline is that when we all get together, root yourself in our reality. But the public discourse is different than that. The public discourse is how smart you are. Like, what did you do? Where did you go to school? These are, and again, other people be publishing that stuff and saying that's our consciousness. It's not really our internal consciousness. We are extremely expansive, extremely accepting when we get in a room that's closed and we're dealing with one another, right? And we got to record that consciousness as sure as we got to record that other consciousness. You know, we got to give, and again, that's the freedom you experience. I mean, imagine being able to read a book and ain't nobody saying white people is racist. It's not in the book. And I mean, that feels
Well,
good.
you got a section in here though at the end, right?
Yeah, we do. But we don't
I'm just trying to remember because I want to make sure I ain't lose my mind. The white people, you got the man, Becky, Karen, and more white people. I want to make sure I didn't, you know, my mind ain't completely gone. I'm gonna be crazy as hell. Yeah, y'all go ahead and get ready, y'all, because now we're gonna start coming, open up conversation. Anybody got anything to say? I'm bringing the microphone out here. Please, go
We
ahead.
just had to define a few terms.
Would you please
I
talk about that
mean,
section?
we just had to define a few terms. I mean, because, you know, we got white readers too. They want to know what a Karen is. They need to know. Becky, they don't know.
You're not born a Karen. You made a Karen, right? Is that what y'all
Karen.
Okay.
They
'Cause
need-
a lot of
the
Karens
man-
mad
the
in the black
man-
community. I know one
everybody
quite well.
knows what the man is, but they don't know. You just need a little help.
No question.
So we just trying to help all of our readers.
And we gotta say this too, is that, you know, again, and this, I know we're about to open up for questions,
That's good.
but again, you talk about opposition, you talk about binaries, you talk about yin and yang, and the Western mind can't really understand that. But then if you get to the I Ching, then you have 8 fundamental guas, which are formed out of those binary principles. So this idea of compartmentalizing white people in a book about Black history, we should have done that like 1,000 years ago.
Like every black book should have like a section that just says, these are the white people that keep showing up. This is their section. The back of the bus. Like
And he
in
did
this
put them in
book,
the back.
in this book, they in the back of the bus. But we want you to know that they are not the most dominant, powerful thing that's going on in black people's consciousness. They got a place. We cannot deny that. We're not trying to negate it. But let's put it in a place, and then the other thing the book does with the archetypes is it suggests that the iterations of black consciousness, independently of opposition to white people, exist. So you
Could
can
you
read
mention
this.
something? When you say archetypes, what kind of archetypes?
Right, so yeah, we got the badass. I mean, which should have been in a whole bunch of books already too. The black people that ain't scarred by racism. Like the black people that ain't losing. Like, I mean, every black book should have like the winning section for like black people. Like, because I mean, again, this will be over and there'll be like some black people that'll be like, yeah, that was really good. Like the Taiji people in China, they'll be like, yeah, the communists were here, the emperor was here, whatever, but we still Taiji.
No question.
We've been here, we like outlived the empire. There's certain black people like that, right? So it's like you get the opportunity when you're reading this book to say, oh, I'm like these particular black people. And then whatever they're doing is not solely defined by their response to white people. And that's a problem with black history, is that white people are just all too important. And we have to struggle, like this book in those 10 years, and did Yi Ching and Taiji give rise to a way to solve that problem. There's a way you can look at this book and you can miss that. You can always be like, they're just playing with the language, but really what we do is we get rid of the binary opposition that it is always the angst when we're dealing with white people. And that takes a certain measure of science.
Interesting.
It's not, you're not going to Harvard and Yale and getting that. Like it doesn't work that way. And evil folks, I'm sure, have done that work. I just haven't read the books yet, right? But black people who are engaging systems outside of the Western system,
Oh, no question.
that's what we're looking for.
That's
We're
the
looking for
idea,
ways
and
to
that's
solve
the
it.
African Senate, which would be different even than the Asian, well, not the Asian, than Tai Chi or any year. I would say that.
Yeah.
So this was a select. There is a paradigm. There is a structure. A lens, maybe is a better phrase. Okay. All right. Can we?
Yeah, I'm definitely okay with that.
Y'all ready? Oh, I'm gonna see hand in the back, and I'm gonna work my way forward. Oh, you got it. You got it, Chris.
Yep, I got it.
You have an old man.
Thank you. I think they had the back person come forward.
Thank you.
That's what I'm
I
talking about.
appreciate you. I
This is
appreciate
good.
it.
This is excellent. No, brother.
it.
Like, you're crazy. Wow.
All right, good evening. I appreciate very much. I was actually in search of a new curriculum to use with my middle school students here in Southeast, and I feel as though I potentially found it. And so my question to you is, can you talk a little bit about how you selected the topics or how you put together the particular people and the title that you used to group all those people together?
Well, I'm glad to hear that you're thinking about using it in the classroom. We're both teachers. And at the back of the book are writing prompts, writing across the discipline. They come from different methodologies. People with different interests can engage. So it wasn't foremost in our minds. We are teachers, so I think it's embedded in the way we think and the way we operate. But at some point, it became foremost when we were thinking about, okay, how does this book particularly read across different audiences? And we do think it works well in the classroom. There's a couple of language things in there. I don't know, but the kids in Southeast, I met a few. My daughter used to teach in Southeast, the kindergartners.
How about that?
If you want a testimony, she's right back there with the baby. You can ask her. So I know they know these words. I don't know what the school district will say. However, I do think it will work well for the classroom. The way we were thinking about how we structured it, I'm trying to remember how we got there, but I know it had to do with the tones first. Because when we started thinking about different people, we would discuss them, and then the tone we used to discuss them shifted. And that's when we started realizing that we can use the same words with different tones and mean entirely different things. And so then it was like, well, what do we mean when we're talking about Erykah Badu? Is that the same thing we mean when we're talking about Harriet Tubman? And it's like, no, well, we're thinking about Harriet Tubman. She's a runaway. And then everything like that, well, she just funky. I mean, she walking down the street naked.
Which did happen, right? Yeah. It's on YouTube.
It's, you can look it up.
Lord, no
And that's the other thing we do for not just for classroom, but we're not trying to be comprehensive. We're trying to show a way of thinking, and we have guides where it's a guide. So we're like, okay, look here, and then we try to offer at the end of each section some ways to narrow what happens when you do Google or go on a search engine and look, because you can find 300,000 different things. And so we try to offer a little bit of guidance to pare that down. But the way we picked was based upon, we thought we might do about 100. We started writing lists and we just started sorting through the list, and we were trying to offer a range. And most people, when they look at the book, they say, you should have had. You should have had. You should have had. And we're like, we know, we don't have everybody there. And there's only one category that we both agreed. We were like, hey.
Really?
Yeah, the military.
Oh,
Yeah, we missed that one.
I missed it. It's not in here.
It's not in
No,
here.
it's not. But you got soldiers in. You got Denmark VZ, Nat Turner, Harriet Tubman. But it's not. You thought about a military category?
We should have.
Who was gonna be in there? Cold Power Crazy as
We
hell.
can start with Christmas Adam.
Crazy as hell. Why you throwing snowballs at the police with them white boys? You know you gonna get killed. You crazy as hell. That's why he buried in the old church. Oh, it's just wow.
Did I answer your question?
All right. Let's put another hand. Oh, that. Come on, y'all. This is good.
Yes, hello and good evening. And as far as the concept, when it comes to crazy as hell, how do you discuss as far as the concept of self-compassion, as far as mind-body connection? If you're tired, feel it, stop. Or when it comes to self-empathy, as far as I'm doing just fine. I think because of work and also the concept of being smart and not intelligent, I think sometimes because of that, as human beings, you know, as far as someone is African Caribbean descent, even me, I get disconnected from that. But sometimes, you know, I get brought back into that. So when it comes to the title Crazy as Hell, how do you address that? Granted, I haven't read the book, so more than likely you have, but if you're willing to share, please do. If I need to read the book, that is also cool. All right, thank you.
I'll start and then pass it to you. But I don't think we specifically turn our focus in that way. But what I would say is that implicit in the whole discussion is Black humanity. I think the whole book, the premise of the book is affirmation. It's about, we actually we do that. I forgot about the part. We do that then. We have public service announcements where we directly address the audience, the reader, and we challenge some of the things. We'll lay out a category, we'll say these things about the category, and then we say public service announcement. And we directly address the reader with a concept that says, okay, like if you, the rebel, like if you weren't leading rebellions before you picked up this book, don't start. Come on now. But part of what I think is implicit and really important in the book, there is a certain kind of violence that we do not acknowledge when we think about, let's say that, what is it? It's a monument to Martin Luther King, right? We have to go there and we have to look up at him right here on the mall, right? You go there and it's static. It's monumental. And there's a certain way that that's violent because that was a person. He had a family. And we don't talk about it. Somebody wouldn't let me put that in the book. But Martin Luther King, I don't know, it was somebody, I'm not sure who it was.
It's not King, it's here.
But this point is not in the book. Dr. King had 4 children. 2 are deceased. 2 are alive. They're all older than me. I'm old. My granddaughter's sitting right back here. And he's got 1 grandchild who's a girl. The King line, that's a cost that could likely be arguably traced back to the service he rendered for his community. Right? There's a certain kind of violence when you reduce I'm saying reduce while I'm talking about looking up, but when you reduce a man to a monument, because his life was bigger than a monument. And there's a certain violence that we resist by not talking about him like that. We like Martin Luther King was crazy as hell, because you crazy as hell, I'm crazy as hell, and he was crazy as hell. We keep his humanity intact by acknowledging he was a flawed, complex human being. And by so doing, we say to anybody who's reading it, Black history is not some kind of out there, you can't touch it, it's too big, you can't even imagine it. It is what we do, what we potentially do. We are Black history, and we're trying to keep central the idea of our flawed, complex, beautiful, ugly, terrible, wonderful existence. And so I think in that way, the mental health piece, the self-care piece is always a part of what we're talking about at the core of the book.
Yeah, thank you very much. I recently was on a call with someone in Philadelphia who is absolutely crazy as hell and absolutely brilliant. A brother by the name of Dr. Tony Montero. And,
Oh, yeah, Tony crazy.
and he does a lot of work with young people up in Philly around Baldwin and W.E.B. Du Bois. And they were talking recently about what you're talking about in terms of us as a people trying to regain our humanity. And they all were saying, and Dr. Montero in particular was saying that the way we've been trying to do that is to get to it through love, expressing ourselves and expressing love. And I'm wondering if that theme, that idea of love enters into the book there in terms of how we, achieve and express our humanity.
And again, I'm not sure that we thought about it in terms of love in that way. I think a lot of the work that I've done, like when I'm practicing Tai Chi, I'm not thinking about love. I'm just being clear. I'm thinking about where I stand. I'm thinking about whether my center, how balanced my center is, am I properly aligned? That, again, and I think some of it, it's not that love is not a consideration, but the discourse of love, to me, is almost like the discourse, like again, for Dr. King, why ain't Dr. King stay in India for like 30 years and then come back? Like, there's something really Western about showing up in India for like a couple of months and then bringing back the idea of nonviolence, Indian people got real sophisticated educational structure. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can't just show up and be like a yogi. You know what I'm saying? Any more than you can show up and have a doctorate here, right? But he did it here, but he didn't do it there. So this question of how it gets imported, right? And again, the West is a factory for importing concepts, and the discourse becomes a substitute for the consciousness. So when somebody asks you about love, there's only a couple answers you can get, right? With being Black in America, somebody asks you, well, what about love? And then you start thinking, well, how do I talk about love? I wouldn't think about that. And I don't really think about that type of discourse, right? And that's not to say that I couldn't think about it, right? It's not to say that I couldn't develop a discourse to talk about love and what it even means to love Black people. I wasn't there, You know, I was thinking more about what have I heard? What have I seen? How do I reconcile that with my developing consciousness? You know, so again, you know, I'll think about love, and maybe if we write another book, we will engage it in that particular way. But ideas of love that are, you know, put through books and then put out to the rest of the world, I mean, I'm not sure about those right now. I'm not reading them. I mean, maybe you guys are, but I'm not reading them. That's not what I'm reading, you know? And I'm not necessarily, I mean, I think love is important, but I think, again, sanity and clarity, alignment, centeredness, what is the way that you manage your relationship with phenomena? Is this valid a question, you know? Like, can you see clearly? Are you rooted in your existence? You know, I mean, are you aware of the places where violence rises up out of you? Because just because you're talking about love don't mean that you done settled out the way violence is in your life. It doesn't mean that you're a perfected human being because you got a discourse on love, you know? And I know that, and again, it's part of the way the book works is that I'm not making a definitive statement about people who do talk about love, right? Just trying to be clear, that's not where I'm at right now. That's not what I've been thinking about, you know?
Yeah, I don't have an easy answer for that either. I mean, it wasn't in my head, but the thing that comes to mind when the question of love enters with this book is a story. Forgive me, I'm a storyteller. But we had a reader who happens to be Jewish, right? And he read the book, the early version, and he was very upset because I don't know who she was. I forget what he referred to her as. But his second mother. His second mother loved him. And he was very upset about what we wrote in the Mammy section because he was not clear any longer whether what we said in the book was applying to his situation, because he was pretty clear. His second mother loved him. But when he read what we wrote about mammies, it upset him, it troubled him.
Or say when his mother was black, I'm just catching up.
Mm-hmm. Because
she loved him.
She loved him.
Because he knew her.
He knew she loved him.
He knew that he knew her, but we don't know.
Well, once he read what we wrote about mammies, somehow he decided that applied to his second mother situation.
Oh.
And the question of love got to be very challenged for him. Because he thought he knew.
But if he knew, you shouldn't be mad, right?
As
my mom might say, the hit dog house.
Yeah, so that's the only point that I ever remember thinking about love in relationship to the book was when he came and he was tearful.
Oh, so what y'all say?
Oh, y'all can read it. It's right there.
But I mean, in the discourse with him, I mean, there's nothing to say. I mean, I think that's a sign of the book itself, right? Because it's very rare that somebody catches the revelation, given the way we be using rhetoric.
Okay.
Like half of our rhetoric is lined in to get. It's like a conversation. Everybody's saying what they're supposed to say.
Oh.
I mean, Western rhetoric doesn't produce revelation. It's not the talk of sages. It's the talk of states. It's the way that you manage influencing people. And when you are influencing people, it's based on the dynamics of power. It's not based on your human consciousness opening up to revelation and seeing the world in a different way.
Remember, we'll call that the rhetorical effort.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't mean that.
Exactly.
You trying to.
And that's the way we dance. I mean, like the history of African American rhetoric, I call it a rhetoric of survival. Like somebody asks you some question, you like, well, how do I say what I want to say and survive?
Oh, wow.
Not how do I say what I need to say to align myself, say, with the universe or with the power dynamics that exist outside of white folks. Because maybe we could talk that way, right? But that's not even the way we do this thing. We like so busy. So when I mentioned the discourse of love, right? I wouldn't trust no black people who say, I'm gonna let you punch me in my head and I still love you. I haven't met no black people like that. What is you saying? Like, what you really trying to do, right? Because it don't work that way nowhere else except when we dealing with this so-called white supremacy. It's the only place you're gonna let somebody beat your ass and then be like, I love you. And they believe you. Like, I mean, that's what my issue is why would you even believe that?
Because in that case,
Because it gotta be something else, right? I mean, it gotta be something else. It's not necessarily, I mean, that's not necessarily, and that's the thing is like, we get into the right or wrong of it, which is sort of like, are they telling the truth? But that's not even, phenomenon lets you know that it is whatever truth it is, but it's gotta be plotted on a map along with all the other pieces of the phenomena that exist. And that's what scholars and academics and intellectuals do is they say, okay, well, these are the words, but then we map the words or plot the words in relationship to all the other things that are going on to really let us know what the words mean. But that dialogue with white supremacy is like a dialogue where we stop plotting. That's the thing. In the end, we say white supremacy. That's a fallacy. I mean, it's not even a concept. What the hell does that mean? Like every time you say white people are not superior, you use the word supremacy. That got to be cognitively like confusion. Why would you even say that?
Okay, let me ask you about that.
Yeah, go ahead. Let me ask you because maybe it's there and it wasn't in a category. I'm thinking about what you all write, for example, about the cultural kind of meaning makers in the book. And Brother Bell wrote a book on the history of Black music. He's from Philadelphia. It's kind of fortuitous we're here in June, which is Black Music Month, realizing that it was created out of Philadelphia. Kenny Gamble, Diana Williams, with the Black Music Coalition in the 70s, they wanted to promote that. And of course, Philadelphia International Records, their motto was a message in the music. That's why you hear Love Train. That's why you hear, I mean, this whole question that you have musicians scattered through here. And when you talk about Nina Simone, after Dr. King was assassinated, that live Martin Luther King suite where she says, Miss Sucky Goddamn, she's the king of love is dead. I ain't about to be lying about it. In front of all you, it's an act of love almost. Bob Marley you have in here, to go back to the question, and one of the few people, at least as far as I can recognize immediately, who comes out of a place other than the United States. I shot the sheriff, but I didn't shoot the deputy. Now y'all do have a kind of, and this is something I want to ask as well, a kind of fidelity to law and order in here, I thought. Don't go break the law now unless you know, which I thought I wanted to ask you about. But in terms of love, there's no category called love, but in the musicians, Parliament, there's a love, I won't say a love ethos, but there is a commentary, it seems to me, or am I overstating it?
No, I appreciate that. And I mean, I'm listening to you and engaging you, Dr. Carver. I'm witness, man, as much as participant. You know what I'm saying? So yeah. I mean, that's what a conversation is. So when I'm listening to you, I'm listening and thinking about it, in some different ways. I would say this with Law and Order, and I mean, I did this.
Yeah,
but I mean, we put like, why every time somebody talk about Black people committing crimes, Black people can't just say we hate crime? I don't understand that. Somebody stuck a pistol in my son's face. I won't go to jail. Maybe y'all don't. Maybe y'all cool with that. Be cool with it. I'm not. Because the other thing is you giving my son a chance to enter into this psychic low-level state where he got to think, if he don't get justice for that, then he got to think about violence from another perspective, which is part of the way. It's not just that Black people be engaged in, sometimes when we don't get justice, we engage in that, we enter into that arena. And so I just don't understand. And I think the left does that. Like every time they come to us, they won't let us say that. So I'm saying, like, I can talk about anything that deals with Black people, crime, mass incarceration, all that. But the first thing I'm gonna say is I hate crime. I don't want that in my neighborhood. Right. I don't want that. And Black people don't live those, like Black people that have gained some type of economic means, the first thing they do is leave. I mean, it's only like less than the 1% that's gonna live in a bad neighborhood and say that's like some act of like me being down with Black people. So I mean, why again, schizophrenic discourse. You feel one thing, you know one thing, but the type of ideas that you gain that you can publish, like we're gonna put you on CNN, is not what you really feel. So let's write books like Crazy as Hell to just be like it's all crazy as hell, or let's write books like Crazy as Hell that don't have a rhetorical position, right? So if you can't say what it is you want to say, then find different ways to even engage the book. Maybe we want to read something different, right? And I mean, that's why
you know, again, Efua, East, Proverbs, like that's the reason we be engaging literature and language in those particular ways. But again, why can't we just, the official position for the whole black community should be, we hate crime. And then everything else. Don't talk about mass incarceration before you start talking about we hate crime.
You don't think that's okay?
Nah, I don't. I mean, I hear the dialogue and the conversations a lot of times. But again, like when I tell somebody, you act like my son getting a pistol stuck in his face is like nothing.
Oh, wow.
I'm saying, nah, I'm still mad about that. You follow? And it happened to him twice. You follow? But I'm saying like, that's not publishable stuff from black people. And then again, you say Black Lives Matter, and then like, we can't manage to take all the crime that occur in all the black neighborhoods and make that a Black Lives Matter conversation? Because that shit's still happening. Like, I need a white man killing me to make it a serious conversation about violence and crime? That's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. At this stage of the game, absolutely ridiculous. And that's why the book doesn't have a politics.
Is that why you write this line? If you become a Black history hero just because you are killed, we might be at the end of Black history.
Exactly. Exactly. And why hadn't that been said before? Like, half this stuff is like, I think black people be thinking this stuff. Like, my thing is, that ain't me. I know black people be thinking this stuff. We just can't get it published. But nah, we're not that smart. We're not no super niggas. We from wherever we at, we thinking the same stuff everybody black is thinking. But what happened is we got lucky and we didn't have an edit button on. And we wasn't thinking about our jobs or trying to get published, and we wrote something, and then we were super lucky because we knew Dwayne. You follow what I'm saying? Who was nurtured by black men in prison in addition to being traumatized by it. If you know anything about Dwayne Betts, every day you talk to him, he's trying to get somebody out of prison, he's talking to somebody in prison. He is not an advocate for the humanity of people that have been in prison. He is the humanity of people that have been in prison. And so when he reads his book, he's not looking at this book. I know he's a super sharp dude. But when he reads the book, he's like, yeah. And then he stands behind it. So again, he's a Malcolm in this generation, whatever way we want to look at it. He's an iteration of that super intelligent person that goes to prison and defines himself in a different way. You don't go to the Nation of Islam now when, or some people do, but he's an iteration of that, and he's the one that positions this text so that an editor can look at it and it actually gets published. But the scariest thing after you write a book like this is it may not see the light of day. It just be like a discussion. I'd be at St. Kofa, me and Dr. Prince be in the back, we'd be like, yo, yeah, we're going to do something crazy as hell. Yeah, crazy as hell, man. We got all these people in there. You'd be like, yeah, I'm down at St. Kofa. I seen this dude, he just stole a bookstore, you talking about this book crazy. But it won't be in print. Because we can't ignore it anyway. Yeah, I know, because we can't leverage it. And so all of that is just part of the experiment and the work.
Get 3 more? Okay, I think that's, let me see. I'm following the rules here. 7:30, so we get these last 3 and then sign some books.
Hello, good evening.
Yeah.
Glad to hear you all speak about this topic today. I just had a question. I initially was going to ask about some new people that you think are making, I guess, Black history, if you will, or whatever type of history this is supposed to be about. But then you had me thinking, how would you decipher when somebody is making history?
Yeah, I have to think about that. Because, part of it is that the people in the book weren't making history by making history. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's happening right now. And and again, that sounds like discourse, just because there's a lot of crazy discourses. But, nah, it's not. It's real. Like, reality and phenomena and history and records of civilizations are in dynamic flux, right? And again, butterflies, quantum mechanics, all of that, man, this stuff is real. And so, it's just in flux. The people that we name, and again, we're naming people, but we're also trying to get at a concept,
So that idea of who's doing what, I think is very valuable, especially now in terms of making a career and even making money. But I don't think it's that important outside of that. I think it's about the vision that we have, you know? So I mean, your question is like a part of history. I mean, like you asking that to me, like changes my perspective, and I'm gonna think about that in a different way. But I don't have a definitive formula that I'm gonna apply, and I'm not really going to look for nobody after that conversation either. But what I am gonna do is I'm gonna pay attention, right? And I'm gonna think about history sometimes when I'm in flux with everyday people, you know? And we'll see what happens. So I appreciate the question.
Yeah, and I'll just add one thing. I think the reason why it's hard for me to come up with an answer to that question is because we weren't really thinking about who's in history so much as we were thinking about the nature of history, right? It's conceptual. Everything is conceptual. So it doesn't matter so much who's in the book because we left out more people than we put in. And you could write the same idea of the book with 100 entirely different people.
So you got another volume. I'm just speaking.
So you
out.
got the exclusive, right?
You know, yeah, exactly.
I did tell him we need to start writing a list of all the people because every now and then we like.
Because you know those little cute books. What are those books called, Jonathan? Those little history books. All right. There's a market for the history book series.
The history
Yeah,
book
like
series.
those
Well, we have spent a lot of time discussing translations,
Oh, really?
and what that would look like. If there's a Spanish version, and Afro-Spanish history, and
Put some Arturo Schomburg in there. And,
yeah,
Sadie Cruz.
I mean, you got that whole. I mean, it's a whole lot of people, right?
Yeah.
And then we have thought about Chinese and what that would look like, and French and what that would look like. Those are the 3 languages we have discussed. It's work though. It's work.
You said yeah, a couple more.
Yeah, the Who Was series that for kids is a very popular series, and they go over any person, any topic, every concept, and I feel like this for adults could do the exact same thing. You know?
Was there another? Oh, that.
Yes.
Hello. How's it going? My name's Elijah Prince. That's my mom. I'm super proud. So I actually wrote it down because I knew I was gonna forget. One thing that I really enjoyed about like reading y'all's book was like going over the categories and like seeing where I fit in those categories. So I wanted to ask you guys, which category would you all place yourselves in, or which category do you relate to the most?
Oh, yeah. I'm looking at you, Dr. Carter. Oh, no, mine's easy. Where's the Hotep and the Wakandans?
They an imaginary and visionary.
Yeah, which I also had a question about last day. Thank you, Brother Prince, because I had a question about how we integrate memory with vision. Because the characterization of the Wakandans and the Hoteps, I didn't see an engagement with the past as it occurred. It's almost like they're making up a past. To me, that's the flaw of the use of Hotep as a pejorative. That tells me you don't know nothing about classical Africa. You've associated with something that's a problem in our community, which is this anti stuff. That, you know, the YouTube. I hate to use it because I'm a YouTuber. but that people use that pejorative and say Meta-Nature is a beautiful language. And like Yoruba, like Tree, like Hausa, like the languages of Africa contain the values that are in these people who are crazy as hell. To me, you don't have to look to China first. You gotta look, but when we say hotel, it's it's like how people would, it's like, oh, so help me. That's where I would be. I would be in that. So it's easy. I'm sorry, I'm gonna get you. Go ahead. You think, of course, thank you. I'm crazy as hell. It's crazy enough to believe we can recover that memory. But anyway.
Yeah, and maybe it sounds like I'm sidestepping, but when I talk about that I Ching and then the binaries and the way the archetypes are, I mean, you know, if you study the I Ching long enough, you realize that your human consciousness moves through those fundamental transitions
all the time. And that would be the end game for me. Is, I mean, I probably want to be badass more than anything else, you know? It's like Bulletproof Black, right? Like, all of it rolls off of me. But again, I got an essay called I Am a Wakandan Hotel, you know? So I'm that too, you know? I'm Brother Yao, right? I mean, sometimes Hoke Glover, right? I mean, I got a whole bunch of nicknames. So, you know, I think I appreciate that question is, and I mean, that would be another evolution, which is how it is that we see ourselves in all of the archetypes, you know, and how it is that we recognize that our consciousness moves through a set pattern of responses that pretty much all of our ancestors have had to these particular situations. So we are not stagnant, you know what I'm saying, that we are dynamic, and those responses, like Orishas, rise up on it. So, you know, certain days, you know, you're bulletproof, you know, and then other days you run away. You know what I'm saying? And then other days you feel like you committed, right? So that would be the next iteration.
What would you say?
I know that. Oh God. Actually, I gotta get in my car.
I think I'm between two categories, which would be the wanderer and the intellectual. Yeah. My kids affirm.
You guys at least let us know who's in those categories. The Wanderer, you have, let's see, Medgar Evers, Booker T. Washington, Huey P. Newton, Amiri Baraka, Bass Reeves, Bessie Coleman, and Petey Freestraw, double son-in-law. And then the other one you said was intellectual. Interesting, that was one of the shorter ones. Zora Hurston, Nella Larson, and Angela Davis. Interesting. And there's all women. Yeah.
All women.
Yeah.
But there's absolutely nothing comprehensive about this book. I mean, nothing. It's like, this book is for the sophisticated. Like, again, Dr. Carr, it's like, there's a whole, and again, Wakandans are whole types. I mean, people are studying Black history and got triple doctorates in it. I mean, like, and where's your record for that? It's not just because you went to college. I mean, there's a whole community of us who've been studying these books for years.
And you've been at the center. You sold a lot of those books, so you
Yeah.
know better than most people.
And so it's
Serious
just like,
scholars.
and then I just remember crazy as hell facts. So I mean, the whole idea is like, I mean, because I'm saying like that's what happens when you're reading Black history. I mean, like Assata Shakur gets broken out of prison. I mean, that's like a crazy as hell fact. It's absolutely inspiring, right? I mean, for me,
No way.
I mean, like in the BLA, like we put a BLA in here, but like, I mean, but I'm saying like you're reading this, and if you have been exposed to certain educations or you live in certain communities, it's absolutely unbelievable and all striking, and you remember those things. And so, I mean, it's like I've been making a record of that my whole life as I study this history. So it's not this really academic thing where I'm trying to define something for somebody. I'm just saying, like, I mean, like, I'm fascinated by this. Like, when you find out who Amiri Baraka is, they don't fascinate you? Like, blues people? You know, what is it? Preface to a 20 volume suicide? I mean, like, you're reading this stuff, and then you like, and then he's like a model? Right. Then he's like, somebody blew up America, right? Like, you like, damn, like, you would live, you could be here, you could live like that.
And then your son the mayor.
Yeah, and your son's the mayor. Right. I mean, so it's like you hear these things and you see these things, and how do you categorize them? You cannot categorize them based upon racism. What racism got to do with that? That's right. Why do you think? I mean, like racism is, you know, somewhere in the room, but it's really way in the back. It's not that important when you're dealing with this. These are amazing people who are amazing human beings that we do them injustice to sort of act like the arc of Black history is somehow how they respond to the white people. Beautiful people. They're just beautiful people, and that's what we do. Like when you see them people in your lives, and you be like, "Yo, I gotta go to work," and you like meet Amiri Baraka, like you gotta go to work, you gotta do a job, and this dude is like running around writing all these beautiful things, talking about Black people and all that. You like that dude's crazy as hell. You categorize him as being outside of the norm, but he's a part of you. He's like, coming, you Black person this, Black person that. So I mean, that's the record of Black history that I have when I'm reading it, you know? Just absolutely inspiring that like people do these fascinating, beautiful things and they become a part of Black history, but really they just like
I mean, everybody in Black history, like we're all like that. That's the real thing. And when you get down to these crazy as hell facts, then I mean, you just start looking at people that are doing stuff that you call crazy as hell, and you're like, man, well, maybe that's how the history really works. Like maybe that's what's really happening. Maybe it's these people just being different enough to do something different and to sustain it. And maybe when all of this is over, then it gets recorded. But they exist. And they exist without saying they're pressing towards some norm, or they're gonna change, or they're gonna be better, or they're gonna do something. I'm gonna go. No, some of these people just exist. You know, they move like sunrise. Like, I mean, right. I mean, the stuff is like absolutely fascinating. Like when these people show up in the room, you're happy to be alive.
That's true. That's true.
Like you're happy. It's like life is 3D and HD. And when these people show up, you get all tingly because it's like, oh my gosh, we're alive. And that's Black history. That's really what Black history is. Not white people and all of that.
Let's get this last comment as you pass the mic to it. It reminds me though, remember that scene, if y'all seen Spaces to Place with Sunrise? And the young people playing pool and dancing and music. And Sunrise just appears out of nowhere with the Heru behind him. And they like, what the hell? He says, don't you know you're not real? I was like, but it changed the whole vibe. He just showed up in the joint. Yeah, that's a good point. It's amazing to do. In that space, it just makes you say, we could be free. Y'all make that point about freedom. Yeah. Part of freedom is you don't have to think about oppression. You're free. Yeah. We free right now. We are free like space. No way. All the way. You see one more?
Yeah, so we have one question back here, but I wanted to shout out to the Nubians that are watching online. We got 122.
Oh, the Nubians here?
Yeah, the Nubians are in the house. Shout out to the Nubians.
We free.
All of them up in there
And
saying,
y'all crazy as hell.
They say we watch Dr. Carr every week.
All right. So y'all get this book now. Sankofa.com, because we buying these here. Ain't gonna be no more. You gotta order something.
Definitely want to shout out to Nubian. I'm a Nubian myself. So we are definitely in the building. Quick question. A lot of the conversation had to do with basically African people defining themselves outside of the white gaze. And one of the things that came to my mind was the whole concept of double consciousness, W.E.B. Du Bois. I just copped the book and I noticed that he's not in the book because it seems like he was thinking about what you guys were thinking about in Souls of Black Folks. So why isn't W.E.B. Du Bois in the book?
I'm gonna let the person with the doctorate from Wayne State. I can ask you. I mean, it's not comprehensive. I mean, it's really just that simple. I mean, literally in this room right here, I bet you we can name 50 people that were left out. I mean, Mark Garvey's not in the book. I mean, it's just like, and Black history is like that. But that's the other thing is that, smart Negroes always get it right. They got everybody. And they'll tell you why, right? And they'll tell you why somebody else that didn't get it right was not right. I mean, we like scared. Somebody write a review of the book and be like, y'all didn't get this right. I mean, it's a dangerous game out here. Nah, and we really didn't play the review game. We sort of like free Black space, grassroots approach to it, But again, I mean, it's like, but the thing too is, I mean, I think for you to think about, the other thing is if you ask why it was not here, then you probably wrote the entry in your head already. Oh, if you're familiar with Du Bois. So it's almost like that freestyle hip hop thing. This is a fat track. You can freestyle on that jump. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's really that simple. It's like the concept is valid, but it's not really about the scholarship. The concept is the scholarship. So do with it what you want. You can write the entry or whatever, and nobody's offended that you think we left it out. Because we just wasn't trying to get everybody in. I mean, we were just trying to put enough people in that related to our experience so that somebody got what the concept is. And when you say that, then that means you got the concept. I mean, send me the entry. I'd love to read it, and play around with it, right? Where is the comedy in it, right? Or where is the humor in it? I mean, Du Bois is so charged, right? I mean, we need to see that, right? We need to see a Du Bois that's not just super intellectual
but we get at some of his contradictions, and then we also get a taste of humor. How powerful that is that for young people to see that? It's like that beautiful picture of Malcolm smiling, you know? It's like, you know, like the one with the gun, right? The gun is cool, but like Malcolm with this like beautiful smile on his face, you know what I'm saying? I mean, it's just like, yeah, Malcolm, my man, self-defense, right? Go hard with a smile on your face. So again, for Du Bois, you know, I'd be interested in seeing that entry, you know?
I mean, he was on our first draft.
Yeah.
Okay. He was on the list. He was.
Oh, okay.
I mean, we couldn't put everybody in there. We had to cut it down.
Sure.
We kept going. We like, okay, we're trying to keep this short.
Which was an objective, right?
Yeah, and I'll say that maybe it's final. I
Yes,
mean,
yes.
the book is short and sweet. I mean, because again, too much of, well, not too much, but the history can easily become didactic. Of course. You know, somebody says, there's a Black History Month lecture, and everybody sort of bubbles up. First you like this, then, you know, like 30 minutes in, you be like, nah, you know what I'm saying? Or you get frustrated. You know, that's the other thing, man, like that. Like some stories you just can't tell me no more. I'm just like, why are you telling me that story? I don't want to hear that, you know? And so there's a way, if you want to research or if you're not familiar with it, you can go out and you can do that work. But the snapshot is just really, really important. And it's not a gimmick. It's about the Black attention span for like this category that can be depressing and somber. So it's not like we're trying to trick nobody. We're just trying to say there's another way you can engage it. You can dip in, and then if it interests you, then you can go out and do some of the work. You can ask questions, or you can talk about it. But it just doesn't have to be like, because I mean, learning Black history, yeah, I mean, again, it doesn't necessarily, or you don't have to hit nobody over the head with it. That's all. It's really just a simple thing, man. And after you study it long enough, there's something fun about this too.
Oh, no question.
You know what I'm saying? And so, what are the books that make it fun for adults? Where you get them? Like, what are the books that when you just read, you like, I enjoy reading that book. God damn it. Like, hip hop. You know what I'm saying? Because hip hop is serious, but you bob your head to it. You want to dance, right? We're trying to make a little Black history book that's got some of that type of energy in it, you know? And it being short is part of that.
And if I could just take this last little moment to say, in honor of my father, who is very sick right now, but I posted this on Facebook. I was inspired by my co-author who also posted a post in honor of his father on our Crazy as Hell page. But my dad, this is not the only book I've written. My dad declared this will probably be the only book I've written that he'll read. Very directly. And when I wrote my dissertation, I bound copies of it and I gave it to my parents and my grandmother. And my grandmother looked and she was beaming and she says, I can't wait to read it. And my dad turned and looked at her. I'm like, no, Mom,
You crazy.
you put that on the shelf.
Wow.
You look at it. You don't read it. He's right. Nobody should ever read my dissertation. It's true. But this book right here, my dad, I gave him a galley. And it's tearing me up because I gave him a galley. And he was carrying that book around the house.
Come on now.
I mean, when I got there, I wanted to replace it with the real book. When I got it, I signed it to him. And I went to look for where he kept it by his little table by his chair. And it was gone because he was in another room. He's carried it around. He's got a little bookmark in it. And he's reading this book. And for me, that's a really special thing. Because what happened is I went to school, I got all smart. And I learned to write some stuff my dad don't care nothing about. But this right here is me maturing to the place where I can speak about something that's really, really important in a way that the people I care most about can take, receive, ingest, and read. Thank you all.
Come on over and get get your books back here. We want to thank Dr. Carr for engaging Hoke and Dr. Prince in conversation. Give it up for Dr. Carr.
Oh, no.
No, of course not. There are plenty of books back there by the desk, and Jonathan can ring you up. The book is very affordable. It's the strangest price I've ever seen. It's $13.
Oh, yeah, and I was gonna say, you know, Reginald Dwayne Betts has an organization called Freedom Reads that's put, I guess 400 libraries and prisons across the country. And so that 54 cent is the amount of money that he got paid, I think, when he worked in the prison library. And so 54 cent of every book that you purchase is actually going to Freedom Reads.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's the reason we had that weird, that's the reason we had that weird price.
I should have led with that. Yep.
Okay.
Y'all come on, get these books signed. I'm gonna get mine signed first.
Thanks y'all for joining.
Man, this is great.